But welcome all to this Euroguidance Network webinar today. Today we have a very interesting topic, inclusive career guidance, theory and practice. I'm Anne Valkeapää, one of the organizers from Euroguidance Finland team, and together with the Lithuanian, Serbian Euroguidance centers, we are organizing this webinar. So welcome all. And this is our agenda for today. We're gonna give you a very short introduction about Euroguidance Network, but it would be also very lovely to see who's on board today. So if you could share a short introduction about yourself in a chat, for example, telling what kind of guidance work you are doing and in which country. So it would be very nice to see a little bit who's joining this webinar today. But we have two main speakers today, and soon after I have finished, we're starting with them. And after the two sort of keynote speakers, there is also the closing for this webinar. And Milena already said that please silence your microphones, but also use active the chat. If you have any questions or comments, please share them in a chat, and we will collect them and answer them after each presentation. There is time for questions, and then it's also okay if you would like to raise a hand and also ask questions via video. That's also okay. And I would like to remind you that this webinar is also having the principles for cyberspace. So it's very important, even in this kind of short webinar, that everybody is feeling okay, that they have a right to personal space. And if there is any kind of harassment, any kind of all, please tell us, the organizers, and we're gonna do some actions about it. But then very shortly, what is Euroguidance? Euroguidance is a European network of national research and information centers for guidance. And at the moment, there are 38 countries involved in this network. And the main target group that we are serving is guidance practitioners in education and employment. Of course, in a national level, this can vary depending a little bit what kind of focus of the work is. But as a network, we are sharing also the sort of the main task that what we have, and the main task is developing the competence of guidance community of the European demands of lifelong guidance. And it has a strategic and practical level ways to do it. If you haven't heard about our communication channels, please have a look at our website, euroguidance.eu. There you can find a lot of different kind of information about, for example, the different kind of events. And in the next slide, I will show you more about some very good practices. You can also follow us in social media, Facebook and LinkedIn, so please join them, and you will get the latest news and information there also. But some of the popular resources in our website, one is guidance systems descriptions. You can find from each country who's involved in Euroguidance network. One popular section in our website is also good practice database. There you can also look for like the theme of today. You can look information, and depending on different kind of target group and different kind of, is it method or tool or what kind of information is needed. We also offer as a network online learning opportunities like these kind of webinars that we are at the moment you are joining. And you can find all these webinars also recorded on a website. This is also going to be on a website, so you can later also have a look on it if you want to remind something, for example. We also offer offer e-courses, for example, e-course about Europass, the tool and information package. We also do different kind of, or produce different kind of publications, different kind of articles that can be found nowadays in a website. Then there is one bigger publication, the Euroguidance Highlights, that can be also found on a net site. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter that will be about once a month. You can get the latest news and information about forthcoming events and publications and many different kind of useful information. But this is all for about Euroguidance Network. And now it's time for our first main speaker. Jarkko, the floor is yours, so please welcome.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for having me. I'll just share my screen and we can get going. So, hi everyone. My name is Jarkko Immonen and I sort of have a double hat on today. I work as a career counselor at the University of Helsinki, but then I do my PhD in the field in University of Eastern Finland. And this is, I've been doing career counseling for a while and the PhD is a newer thing. I'm roughly halfway through my work there and I'm doing my research in social differences and inequality in education and career guidance research group. And I'm also dabbling in a European project called COCAG, Critical Perspectives on Career and Career Guidance. Maybe some people here are also involved in the same project, but this contains a few disclaimers for the presentation today. All kind of practical examples I'm providing, they're from the university context, so more or less working with adults, because that's my personal experience. My research interests include what's called cruel optimism, when something we desire becomes an obstacle to our flourishing, and that is going to come through here and there. The presentation is not about my research, that's not the topic, but I can't help but those perspectives coming through a little bit in different points during the presentation. And most importantly, having to do with the double role that I have, all the kind of critical observations that I make are aimed more at myself than anybody else. It's a exercise in critical self-reflection, and we know that, the day-to-day in career guidance practice, it's messy. It doesn't conform to theoretical models, and we fail every day. At least I fail every day in my work. There are bad counseling sessions always come, and this work keeps you humble. And it's like one of my great idols, Ronald Sultana, once very wisely wrote that he's a bit tired of scholars kind of pouring down on the practitioners and pointing fingers that you should be doing this better and that better, when the reality doesn't follow scripture as it's described in research literature. So that's kind of a disclaimer here also. I'm whatever critical remarks I might have, I'm aiming them at myself, and it's like the researcher in me is often very critical of the things that the practitioner me does in my daily work. So that's sort of the perspective here. And Anne, 2 questions. Can you hear me all right? And clockwise, when do I need to wrap up? I'm trying to save some minutes for questions at the end.
At least I can hear you very well. So
good.
You started about a minute ago,
10.
so you have 45 minutes. It's fine, but of course we hope to have some questions included.
Yes. I'm aiming at about 30 minutes presentation and then some time for questions. But 3 perspectives on inclusive career guidance was the topic. So we need to have some common understanding of what we mean by inclusivity and inclusion in this context. Now, how is it related to, for example, integration, which is another sort of buzzword that gets thrown around? I didn't go with any fancy academic definition here, because I don't think any definitions I've seen are quite as apt as what I heard in a seminar once from the actor DEI trainer Sara Salmani, who said that integration is getting invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And I think the operative idea here is that inclusion includes a dimension of participation in some way. If integration can be solely about access, then what inclusion brings to the picture is actually participating in something. And it's a kind of a continuum, I think, and especially the way I treat this concept here in this presentation, you know, the different perspectives sort of, some of them fall closer to the access side of things and some of them more close to the participation side of things, but it's like those two are kind of interlinked and simultaneously present in at least in the way what I mean by inclusion in this context. And how's the presentation going to pan out? As said, I'm going to explore 3 perspectives pretty quickly. It's not a full day lecture, but you know, first a few thoughts on inclusivity as access. Who gets career guidance and on what terms? I have very little answers, more questions, but kind of trying to provoke some questions and maybe some reflection on how we do things. And then moving on to the participation side of things, inclusivity as praxis. How our career guidance practices include or exclude individuals operating from different societal positions and so on. And the next presentation by Yeva, as I understand, is probably going to delve deeper into this thematic. So these first 2 I'm going to go over fairly quickly and then try and save some time to discuss the third aspect of inclusivity in career guidance, when inclusivity becomes sort of the goal of what we do in guidance, and how can we perceive inclusivity as advocacy in career guidance. How can career guidance promote wider societal inclusion, something that happens after the immediate guidance interaction? And there I have a few sub-themes I'm going to explore. If career guidance is the solution, what's the problem, what I call the counselor's dilemma. And I'm going to end with some kind of half-baked ideas I've been bouncing around in my head and like to sort of bounce off you guys now, whether you think there is any rhyme or reason to my trail of thinking. But we'll talk more about that when we get there. So first, perspective, inclusion as access. I think here there's a lot that we as practitioners can do very little about. We're always battling, especially in institutional settings, we're battling against diminishing resources. Guidance policies don't always kind of realize that career guidance isn't available for everyone in the society when they need them. You know, a lot of people aren't in the reach of institutional guidance. Private services might be very expensive and so on. And you know, just as an example from my work at the University of Helsinki, there are 4 of us career counselors, and we have 35,000 students and PhD researchers who are sort of eligible to our services. But you know, the brute mathematical fact is that, you know, one-on-one counseling is not the most inclusive and not most accessible service in that setting ever. So other things need to be considered. And still our work is often measured by numbers, not like the qualitative differences we might make in people's career paths. And, you know, impact is notoriously hard to measure in career guidance anyway. But, you know, these are sort of parameters that we are struggling with and have often, sadly, very little control over. You know, we don't always control the money, especially in the institutional settings. But what we can maybe do something about sometimes, depending on our respective situations, is to impact the pathways people can use to get into career counseling. Like just as an example, I think, you know, in many places, COVID probably made online counseling a kind of a staple, like a standard thing. That's of course increased physical accessibility to career guidance for individuals for whom didn't maybe previously find those services so accessible. Of course, you know, online counseling has existed before and it's been done maybe very systematically here and there, but I think, you know, it's become a more standardized thing since COVID. And then one kind of an example from the trenches of guidance practice, what we've noticed in my day job is that, you know, a couple of years ago when we started really pushing for different kind of low threshold services, we were very aware that, you know, our online booking system is always, you know, it's hard to get appointments with the career counselor. So what can we do to reach more people? And we started these campus days where we come to the campus in a given room, you know, the door is open and you can just walk in and have a chat with a career counselor, no reservations needed whatsoever. And what a little bit surprised us there was that the qualitative difference of people who came to us in the traditional way by booking an appointment and waiting 2-3 weeks and then coming to career counseling, and the people we met in the campus days, like it's like we tapped into a totally different reality of our students and PhD researchers in the campus days. You know, when people come through the normal route, booking appointments, they usually have already a pretty high level of agency. The questions they're pondering are a little bit different than what we kept seeing in the open door services, where at some days it's felt more like an hospital emergency room. People come with really drastic situations, acute situations, and generally the whole way of, okay, what needs to be done here, it was just a different experience, and we've been developing that service ever since. But I think says something about the inclusivity of services, not just about the numbers. It's who actually can get into the services, who feels that they can come. One often heard comment in the campus days is that, I don't know if this even concerns you, but you were the only one I could come and talk to. You know, we live in a world of faceless service addresses and everything like that. And for many people, that's already a threshold of, you know, trying to get your voice heard. But yeah, inclusivity as access, there's a lot there we can think about, but also a lot of things we can't really do much about. And then moving on to the sort of second tier of the cake, inclusion as praxis, how our guidance practices include or exclude individuals. And I have a couple slides on this. One thing I think we all kind of find ourselves thinking every now and then, how are our guidance interactions arranged? Like, on whose turf do they take place, for example? How do we expect students or clients to behave in guidance settings? One thing I've been experimenting with a couple of years are these walk and talk counseling sessions, and these are probably done in many places, in other places too. But there's like a city garden near where I work, and I have some counseling sessions there. You know, we don't sit down in an office, we walk around the garden. And of course you get to use different methods and use different metaphors than you would if you're just sitting in your office with a bunch of post-its or whatever. And I've noticed that especially for students who have some sort of who are neurodivergent one way or the other, some of them find these sessions more, I dare say, inclusive, in the sense that you don't have to sit still for an hour, you get to walk. You don't have to come to the scary institutional building. You don't need to sit in somebody else's office, you know, feeling that the walls are coming down on you. You don't have to look the other person in the eye. You both kind of look forward and you can kind of just have the chat there. And these things seem to have meaning for some people. It's one way of breaking the normal mold of what it is to engage in a guidance interaction. But as said, a lot of this stuff is probably going to come up more in the next presentation. One thing I still want to mention, what we have done, or my colleague Salla Vilen has done in our actual guidance facilities, where, you know, when we do the normal face-to-face counseling, is stress toys. You know, nowadays, because she's she knows much more about this thematic than I do. And we have these kind of little toys you can fiddle with during counseling, and they've become hugely popular. It's surprising how many people can calm down and focus when they have something in their hands that they can kind of twist and turn or press or whatever during the session. It's been like a the smallest possible input from our side, but it's had a big effect for some people who come to career guidance. But then kind of sliding slowly towards the third perspective, but still talking about praxis, like asking what do we take for granted, especially in institutional guidance settings and kind of guidance practice. There's a lot of research on this, like what do we perceive normal? And if I speak from the context of a Finnish university, we tend to perceive normality as very white, very domestic, very native language speaking, very able-bodied, very middle class. This is I think something that goes far beyond just Finland. University education tends to be very middle class in normative terms, maybe cisgendered, heterosexual, and so on. And how do we signal to our clients and students that we understand and are aware of these normative structures, and those can be sort of discussed in guidance interactions, and are we aware of the social differences that might be construed in when we meet our clients and students, or our positions of power? Because I think it's still more typical that if there is a clear social difference or differences present in guidance situations, it's usually so that the counselor holds the majority position and the counselee the minority position. By and large in our field, this tends to be more typical. And things you can do, and the things I try to do is, using micro signals. I have a rainbow colored keychain I always have in my neck, and there might be an anti-racist poster or something. And meta speech, openly discussing, like bringing forth these sort of invisible structures that are there present in the situation, I think is a big tool for inviting different themes to be discussed in the guidance situation. But it's not even just about us. There's Hanna Lonka has some very interesting research on this, as to what do students, and her research concerns upper secondary education. But what do students perceive as a guidance counseling matter? What is sort of relevant and allowed to discuss with the guidance counselor or career counselors? We, of course, as practitioners, we might think that our praxis is very holistic and very neutral, and we're open to everything. We don't exclude anyone, but that might be a slightly passive position, just a kind of a stance we take, and we know it ourselves. But students and clients may have they have their own perceptions of what is guidance about and what's allowed in guidance. And according to Hanna's results, themes regarding social differences, racism, sexuality, gender, etc., they might not be perceived as themes you can actually discuss with a guidance counselor or career counselor, even though they might be themes that are super relevant for the person's future. How do they perceive what is possible for themselves in the given society and the structures we're living in, and what's sort of allowed and so on. But they still don't, might not come up in the guidance interactions. And then there's the kind of inconvenient and uncomfortable side of things, like, do we as human beings sometimes maybe evade topics that are uncomfortable or inconvenient for us, and our kind of guidance paradigms that are often very goal driven, and the institutional agendas that sort of frame our work, push us towards results. They sort of support not really lingering on the difficult topics maybe too much, and just going forward with the process. So it's easy to kind of, it's in a way it can seem like a justified position in institutional guidance to just maybe just very intricately kind of go around difficult topics that maybe elicit difficult emotions in ourselves. But here's the thing, I think if we use microsignals and meta speech and all that, but then when the opportunity arises, fail to discuss the difficult topics that come on the table or would come on the table if we were to accept them, that might risk cruel optimism, meaning that if we have signaled that guidance is now a space where this stuff can finally maybe be discussed, but then we kind of also evade different topics, we might actually end up upholding the existing equalities that are sort of present in the guidance situation, and the guidance can become a pacifier in a way to push the individual forward, and again sort of close the book on what was maybe sort of needed to be discussed in a way. And this is you may have your own take on this, but this is kind of an bridge to the third perspective of inclusivity in career guidance that I want to talk about today, and that's guidance as advocacy for societal inclusion. The author and journalist David Foster Wallace has, I think, very aptly said about art that the purpose of art is to comfort the disturbed and disturbed comfortable. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I do see a sort of linkage maybe to what career guidance should strive to be. And like, could one purpose of career guidance be to empower the disturbed and the disturbed powers that be? And there's of course the fine line of, as guidance counselors and career counselors, we have to be on the student or client's agenda. We can't make the guidance praxis serve our own whatever agendas we might have. But I think the what I'm aiming at is very well verbalized in an article by Vehviläinen and Souto, where they say that it may not be on the student's own explicated agenda to engage in critical analysis of society, but a guidance encounter should make this possible. And this is where I think is sort of the yellow brick road in what I'm trying to kind of, in my praxis, what I'm sort of learning to do, enable those discussions, and like not just making it like an affirmative action, but like really make it possible for people to open up their minds. And the phrase that I've often used and will use today again, and has come as a kind of a guiding light for me in my practice, what I try to do, is that guidance should strive to be a space where the invisible can be made visible and the inaudible heard. And this it's easier said than done in my perspective, because if we look at how career guidance is often kind of framed, like what is the aim of career guidance and what are we expected to do? And this question is nicely formulated in a few articles. If guidance is the solution, what is the problem? And Ronald Sultana has identified sort of three grand discourses regarding career guidance, like how is career guidance framed? What is the aim of career guidance in research literature? And I think this describes very well what happens in practice also. First of all, there's a technocratic sort of discourse. Guidance is about matching, meeting labor market needs, sort of feeding the machine, supply and demand, kind of matching skills with labor market needs and so on. And then also kind of this is the political sort of expectation and mission statement for guidance by and large, and the purpose that guidance was originally, career guidance was created as a profession, some 120 years ago or so. This is sort of at the core of the what we call career guidance today. And then there's the maybe more kind of a popular, maybe more neoliberal discourse of the career guidance being about enabling individual growth, fulfilling your personal potential. And I think both of these, the first and second discourse, are absolutely ingrained in anything we do as career counselors. We can't like escape these, and we shouldn't escape them. And there are not like wrong or right answers here. This is what we do. These are what makes our profession in a way. This is like the meat of what happens in career guidance. But if we want to do more, if we want career guidance to do something more than this, then comes in the emancipatory discourse, where career guidance can work as an kind of a space and praxis for raising critical awareness of structures, societal positions, contesting neoliberal assumptions, and so on and so forth. How are careers perceived in the modern world? What is normal career development, and so on? And here's the thing, I think the first two discourses are sort of, they take the world as granted, as is, and the agency is about navigating the world and the existing structures as they are. It's only in this third way of thinking about career guidance that the what if world comes into play. Like imagining the world in different terms that it is now, and for that to happen, we need to see the invisible and we need to hear the inaudible. And we are not sort of the career guidance paradigms that we have, the institutional settings that we have, they don't really demand us to do this. This is something we have to actively engage in as practitioners and researchers if we want career guidance to take up this more socially oriented sort of goal or way of doing things. And because again, I think if we fail to tap into this discourse, if we fail to take critical awareness on board in career guidance, again, we risk promoting cruel optimism as, presenting, even though we're trying to boost individual people's agency and helping them, build their own lives. If we convey that the world is as it is and you just navigate and don't worry about the structures, we are again kind of shooting our own foot in a way. But here comes the part where it's easier said than done. It's all fancy and all academic, and it sounds very hoity-toity. But when you're doing career guidance in the day-to-day, that, as said, that work doesn't conform to these fine theoretical models. And I think anyone present today who's done any career counseling, guidance counseling, in the real life, recognizes the situation when you are there with the counselee, and you just, they share their story, they tell you about their problems and challenges and why they're coming, and you just, you're listening, and you get that sinking feeling and this kind of pressure in your chest that I have absolutely nothing to give to this person. I can't do anything about this. This sounds horrible. I have no experience of what she's they're talking about. And we might feel a little bit helpless in those situations. And they might feel very uncomfortable. And I think often there is this dynamic of privilege and oppression at play, becoming aware of our own privilege and the different maybe structural inequalities that are present in the situation. They make us feel very, very uncomfortable, because that's human. We are human beings. We work with our own personalities. And that uncomfortable feeling might push us into sort of a fight, flight, or freeze mode. We might what's the word? Protect our own sort of professionalism and not falling to pieces there and there by narrowing down the focus to kind of the skills and strengths and sort of you can do it sort of thematic, when we're kind of promoting unfounded or maybe even cruel optimism in a way. Or there might be a voice in our head going that if I want to be honest here, the next thing I'm going to say that, yes, you're right, there's probably nothing you can do, and I certainly cannot help you. And maybe we keep that to ourselves, but that voice might be nagging in our ear. And then we might also sort of silence the topic, divert the discussion to some other region that feels more comfortable to us. Oh yes, I hear that must be horrible, but have you thought about, and this sort of, steering the discussion back to our own comfort zone, so that we can feel professional and that we have some tools to offer, and so on. And this is where it becomes, I think, evident that neutral guidance is a total myth. It's simply not possible. I'm not going to go over this whole diagram. There's a lot of stuff there, but the point is that this describes what happens in the immediate guidance interaction between two people. There's a counselor and the client. They meet in the therapeutic system, and I'm not saying counseling is therapy. That's not the point. The term here refers only to the immediate interaction. And we meet inside a shared organizational system, usually inside, at least inside a shared societal system. But neither of the parties involved here can leave their lives at the door. We bring our experiences, our own assumptions, our own views of the world, our own biases. We bring those to the table, and that goes for both parties. And there is this also negotiation of the epistemic ownership. Like, we as counselors might be experts in the process of how is this going to pan out as a discussion or whatever it we do, what methods we use, but the client is always, or the student is always, the expert of the content, their own experience, their own lives, what is sort of the material that we work with in those interactions. So I think this just makes very visible how our professional or our expertise isn't about being able to somehow magically leave everything we have in ourselves, or the history we carry with us, at the door, and we would be some sort of carte blanche in the actual interaction. That's just not possible. The expertise is more about being able to reflect on your own assumptions during the discussion and kind of fitting what you hear into different theoretical frameworks and so on and so forth. But then what to do, and here we come to the sort of the half-baked side of my presentation. It is just something that sort of I've been thinking about a lot, and I would like to hear your ideas on this. Because what is a counselor to do? As I said, guidance is messy. This stuff just isn't. It's also a zero-sum game. If you talk about one thing in a 45 minutes time frame, means not discussing something else. So we're making those choices also constantly. But I've been looking at this philosophical tradition called pragmatism that originated in the US in late 1900s. And in pragmatism, there is this concept of meliorism, comes from Latin, meliora, meaning better. And it's a kind of simply a stance towards the future that stands somewhere in between optimism and pessimism. And, not to go too philosophical here, I think the beauty of this concept is its simplicity. The whole gist of it is here in this one sentence. The world is never the best or worst version of itself at any given moment, but always something in between. And it's always worth trying to make it better, even if we have no guarantee that our actions will actually succeed. And this is, if we take this as an explicated stance in our praxis to how should we kind of, what is the attitude we should have in career guidance? I think this is a very useful idea that could help us remain functional in the face of overwhelming information. It might be realizing our own privilege. It might be realizing that the crises in the world are so huge that whatever we can do is only going to be like minimal. But still, the moral sort of demand is there. We should try and do what we can. Ronald Sultan also said very wisely, I think, that even though the fact that we can't solve everything doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and do something. As a stance for career guidance, this could mean like tolerating difficult emotions and not knowing in the career or the immediate guidance interaction. As a goal for career guidance, which I'm also thinking that this something like this might be, a goal for career guidance in and of itself, regardless of the institutional agendas or political aims or whatever. What is guidance as praxis? What should the goal of that praxis be? It could be something to do with meliorism and helping or conceptualizing agency not only as navigating the world as it is, but to reimagining the world in different ways, and perceiving agency as eliciting what I would almost call like radical hope. What if things were different? And this sort of unflinching attitude towards career guidance could be an antidote for the pitfalls of cruel optimism that I've mentioned, when we divert away from the things that matter to make it seem like we are on the right path and so on. So what could the practical implications of this sort of philosophical idea be? if we were to adopt this as a kind of a stance and maybe also a goal for guidance practice, could help us, first of all, accept that we at the world are not perfect. We can't solve everything. Maybe we can't solve anything, but that's just the way things are. We still don't flinch away from the difficult topics. Helps us to reflect on our own assumptions and positions. Okay, why do I think the way I do? Why I think? Where are these feelings coming from? And maybe even proactively, offering difficult topics for discussion, simply to show that they're allowed. We're not pushing people to, just to serve our needs, but actively making it clear that we are open to discuss whatever needs to be discussed. And that goes also for the institutional agenda, social differences in the counseling situation. You're using that meta speech and so on. And why do I think we should bother with any of this? Why do I think this matters? It comes down to what I think is what makes or breaks career guidance. Because I don't think guidance doesn't fail by not fixing the problem on the table or eliciting difficult emotions on either side of the table. That's not a failure. That's process. Where guidance can fail as a praxis, I think, is if it's not available, if it leaves the student or client feeling not heard or seen, or simply sort of unable to meaningfully engage in the guidance praxis, or if we divert away from or gloss over what actually needs to be addressed. But as said, I fail every day. This is stuff that I struggle with, and knowledge of what I demand of myself can be a pain in the ass.
Hello, everybody. I'm Gileta Kiriene from Euroguidance Lithuania, and it's my great pleasure today to introduce my wonderful colleague, Dr. Ieva Kuginytė-Arlauskienė. She will introduce herself. So, dear Ieva, the screen is yours.
Gileta. And thank you, Jarkko. It was a very interesting presentation. I like it very much. And I think it will be a little bit about this some topic you told in my presentation. So, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ieva. I will present myself a little bit later, a bit more. And today I will talk about practical tools for career planning for students with special educational needs. I will show simple ways to help students understand themselves better, make choices, and plan their next step. But some days ago, I listened to a podcast where a father spoke about his daughter, who is deaf-blind. She had just started working at a wood company. After her first day at work, she brought home a bundle of firewood and gave it to her family as a gift. For several years now, that bundle has stood in their home and nobody has wanted to use it. It is not only firewood. It has become a symbol of her independence. I think this story shows something very important. Career planning is not only about choosing a job. It is about dignity, taking part, personal growth, and the chance to contribute. For students with special educational needs, this process often needs more structure, more support, and more practical tools. But the goal is the same, of course, to help a young person discover what they can do, where they belong, and how they can move one step closer to adult life. So, yeah, back to my story. So that story, I think it reminds us that work can mean more than just a job. It can mean identity, independence, and giving something to others. So career planning is about more than finding work. It is about helping a young person understand themselves, but be part of society and feel that they can do something meaningful. So before I continue, I would like to say a little more about myself and my background. I'm from Lithuania, but I'm working in Norway. My main interests are special education, inclusive education, and universal design of learning. I am especially interested in students with different disabilities and their opportunities to be included at school. I'm also an advisor to the Norwegian Down Syndrome Association. And today I will speak about a topic that is also very important to me, how we can prepare students with special educational needs for the future. My hope is that this presentation will be practical and useful for your everyday. This topic also is important to me not only in my professional role, but also in my personal life, because I'm also a mother of a child with significant special educational needs. So what is the presentation offers? In this presentation, I will share a simple 4 steps model for career planning. I will also present practical tools that can be useful for you. The aim is not to give one fixed method. It's not possible, of course, but to share ideas that can help us make career conversations more simple, more structured, and more meaningful. I would also like to say that special educational needs is a broad term and includes a wide range of needs. So today my focus will be more on students with higher support needs. Before the move to practical tools, I would like to share 4 key ideas. You can see it. And first, it's structure creates safety. It's very important for students with some difficulties with special needs. Clear steps help students take part. Predictability reduces stress, and visual support helps understanding. These ideas are especially important for students with special educational needs because career planning often includes abstract questions, new situations, and important choices. For students with cognitive development disabilities, safety is especially important. They often need to know what will happen, how it will be happen, and what will be next. One practical way to support students is to use 7 guiding questions. These questions make an activity easier to understand and less stressful. As I said earlier, they help the students know what to do, where to go, why it matters, who will be there, how to do it, how long it will last, and what will happen next. This kind of structure is very useful because many activities include new people, new places, and unfamiliar situation. I use this kind of structures myself in everyday life. For example, when we go for a walk, I often say, first, we clean the room. Then we get dressed. And after that, we go outside. This makes the plan clear and helps to my daughter feel safe. But there is one important thing to remember. If the plan change, if I had now, the student needs to be prepared for that change is advanced. So it's important to have plan B and sometimes even a plan C. Let's share some example. Here is one example of how then 7 guiding questions can be used in practice. Let us imagine a student with autism spectrum disorder. The student needs clear structure, visual support, and predictable transitions. In this example, the student goes to the school library and does a short structured task, for example, sorting books and putting them on the shelves. The activity takes place in a calm environment, together with a teacher or support person. The student knows what to do, where to be, why the task is important, who will be there, how to do it, how long it will last, and what will happen afterwards. Next thing, then you can meet in your job with students with disabilities, it's communication difficulties. That is why it is important to remember that every learning process begins with communication. The student needs to understand what we say, and we also need to understand what the student wants to say to us. First, it is important to give one instruction at a time. Why? When we give too many instructions, at the same time, students may feel confused or stressed. This is especially important in career-related tasks because these situations are often new and unfamiliar. It is unusually better to give one instruction at a time and wait until the student understands or finish the step before going on. Supportative communication is not only about the number of instructions, it is also about the language we use. We often use abstract language at our lives. For example, we ask students about their future, their strengths, or what they like, or something else. For some students, this can be difficult to understand. That is why short and clear language is so important. It helps the student focus on the question without confusion. For example, we can ask, do you like white places or busy places? Clear language is important, but students also need enough time to think and understand. Sometimes we ask a question and expect an answer right away. But many students with special educational needs need more time to understand the question and prepare an answer. This does not mean that a student does not understand. It may simply mean that they need more time to think and organize their answers. A silence can make communication much more supportive. Waiting is not doing nothing. Waiting is an important part of supportive communication. You can try till to 10 in yourself, 1, 2, 3, etc. And finally, it is important not only to explain, but also to check if the student has really understood. So after you attend, you can ask, can you repeat me something? So next step is checking for understanding. Very often we ask, do you understand? And the student says, yes, even then things are still not clear. So it is often better to check understanding in a practical way. For example, they can ask the student to repeat the next step, point to the right answer, choose between two options, or show that to do first. So supportive communication is not only about speaking clearly. It is also about making sure that both sides understand each other, teacher and student. For some students, spoken language alone is not enough. They may need extra support to understand and to express themselves. Then spoken language is limited. Augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, can be very important. AAC includes different ways to communicate without using only speech. Some are simple, like signs or science language, picture cards, or communication boards. And others are digitals like speech devices, tablets, apps, and symbol systems. So AAC can help spoke language, or it can be used instead of speech then needed. So now, in this slide, I give some practical ideas for communication support. The main message is that communication should be respectful, patient, and open to the person's own way to expressing themselves. This means asking one question at a time, paying attention to non-verbal communication, allowing the person to show or explain that support they need, and respecting silence as part of communication. It also means being honest when something is not clear and being open to messages that may be difficult to hear. It is important not to be afraid to ask person to repeat something. Asking again is not to weakness. It is part of good communication. Communication is always two-way process, and every attempt to communicate deserves respect and attention. We also need patience because communication can take time, sometimes very long time. At the same time, it is important not to think in stereotypes. Each person should be seen as an individual. Unfortunately, this does not always happen in practice. Sometimes teachers speak to the assistant, instead of speaking directly to the student, almost as if the student is not here. This may happen because they maybe are afraid of the students' direct reactions, maybe. But believe me, this can be very hurtful, even when the student does not communicate verbally. And finally, they should speak directly to the person, not only to the assistant or support worker. This supports dignity, independence, and participation. So now, after structure and supportive communication, they can move to the career planning process itself. I would like to suggest the simple 4 steps model. In the first step is, who am I? This is about interests, strengths, and preferences. The second step is, what can I do? This is about skills, abilities, and support needs. Next step, where do I fit? This is about being a part of community. and getting ready for adult life. It's a big part of inclusive education and, of course, inclusion in CISAP. And the last step is, what is my next step? This helps us turn ideas into action. So now let's look more closely at the first step. Who am I? This means helping the students understand their interests, strengths, preferences, and values. They can ask simple questions. What does the student enjoy? What are they good at? What kind of activities do they prefer? What is important to them in daily life and in the future work? One practical way to explore this first step is to use a simple sorting activity. The students can sort pictures, words, and short statements into groups such as I like, I don't like, I'm good at, or this is important to me, and etc. I can also give a simple example from my own experience. And my daughter, I thought about my daughter, she has significant cognitive development difficulties. So learning mathematics was very difficult for her. For a long time, teachers, they are trying to find the best way to teach her to count from 1 to 10. Later, we decided to connect learning with her special interests, which was words plugs. Some hand signs or sign language. In sign language, for countries were visual similar to numbers. So we used this connecting in practice. For example, the hand sign for Finland, for example, is like this. And it was similar to number 1. The hand sign for Norway was this, and this was similar to number 2. This clear and meaningful connection helped her understand the numbers better. After the few months, she learned the count to 10 much more successfully. One simple tool for this first step is a sorting activity called like, no, or maybe. Like, no, or maybe. The student receives cards with activities, tasks, or work-related situations. This can be pictures cards or a word card, depending on the student's needs, of course. The student sorts the cards into 3 groups: things they like, things they do not like, and things they are not sure about. This tool helps reduce pressure because the student does not need to make one perfect choice right away. It also gives us a simple way to explore interest step by step. Then we use a tool such as like, no, or maybe. The way we speak is also important. The language should be short, clear, and supportive. For example, we can ask, do you like this? If a student is unsure, that is completely acceptable. We can often simple response options such as yes, no, or not sure. Then after sorting, we can say choose 3. If the student cannot decide, we can reduce pressure by saying we can come back to this later, maybe. So it's okay not choose now. These small phrases help make the activity more accessible and less stressful. Visual skills. Some students might find it difficult to answer open questions or make verbal choices. In these cases, visual skills can be very helpful. They support communication and make it easier to students to express their response. In my practice, a feeling scale has been especially helpful. For example, students with cognitive development difficulties often find it hard to understand and name their feelings. Because of this, they may not recognize their emotional state before it becomes too strong. A feelings scale makes emotions more visible and easier to understand. Then a student can show how they feel on the scale. This supports better emotional awareness. It can also help reduce stress and impulsive behavior. This is very important in many situations at work. The second step in career planning is to understand what the student can do. At this stage, we focus on the student's skills, abilities, support needs, and learning potential. This step is important because career planning should not be based only on interests. It should also include what the student can already do, what they can do with support, and what they are still learning. In this way, we create a more realistic and supportive picture of the students' future possibilities. So next tool for this step is a simple 3 columns structure. I can with help, and I'm learning. It is important because it shows not only that the student can already do independently, but also what they can do with support and what they are with development. For example, a student may use a computer independently, follow routine with help, and still be learning how to speak with unfamiliar people. This case, it's very usual for students with autism spectrum disorders. And support can make success possible. It is important to remember that needing support does not mean inability. For many students with special educational needs, the right support makes participation both possible and successful. This is one example from a special school in Norway. So what kind of support can help in practice? Support can take different forms depending on the students and the activity. For example, one student may benefit from a visual checklist. In this case, it can be useful in ADHD, for example. There, the steps are clearly shown. Another student may need modeling first. This means watching the task before doing it. Some students need extra time. Others work better in a quiet environment. Step-by-step guidance can also help when a task is new or difficult. The main points is that support should be individual, practical, and connected to participation. And next task can be about task analysis. Another useful tool. This task means breaking a task into small and clear steps. This helps the student understand what to do and in what order. It also makes the activity more predictable. This does not always need a lot of resources. The important thing is to do it in a systematic and consistent way. For example, they can use the hand to show the steps more clearly. If you can see my hand, so step 1, step 2, and step 3. This makes the task more concrete and easier to understand. Here is another example of task analysis. The task is packing apples for delivery to companies. This example is from same school. The student takes one empty box and checks that it is clean. Then the student takes 5 apples and places them into the box. After that, the student counts again to make sure there are 5 apples. Next, the student closes the box, put it in the correct place, and checks that the task is finished. It also shows that even a simple work task can include structure, quality checking, and task completion. Next step, where do it fit? This step is about participation, making choices, being part of the community, and having a meaningful role. Career planning should help the student not only do an activity, but also take part, feel included, and feel that they belong. So then next question is, what helps make it possible in practice? A good fit is not only about the task in itself, it is also about the conditions that support participation and inclusion. Students need opportunities to take part in real activities, not only to observe. They also need real choices so that they can express preferences and take part of decisions making. So supportive relationships are important as well, because guidance and trust often make participation possible. And finally, a good fit means having a meaningful place in the community, where a student is not only present, but also valued. This is closely connected to 3 main values of inclusion: participation, belonging, on the opportunity to make part in shared decision making. So it's very important for students with special educational needs. So now, Asmir.
Ingunn, hva skal du gjøre med den her nå? Skal vi prøve det?
Ja.
all of these students are deaf blindness. So last step in career planning is to move from reflection to action. At this stage, the goal is not to make a big or complicated plan. The goal is to find one small and realistic next step. This can be one action, one short activity, one visit, one task, or one conversation. It is also important to think about what support is needed and how process will be checked. This plan helps the student focus on one goal, one small action, the support that may be needed, and one simple way to check progress. For example, the goal may be to try one work-related task, visit one place, or practice one skill. The important point is that the next step should be clear, realistic, and easy to understand. And so practical application. The practical way to support communication and participation is to use a social story. Social story is a method then can help a student understand a situation, express a need clearly, and use an appropriate phrases in a social context. Here is a simple example of a social story. Its purpose is to help the student express a personal need in clear and appropriate way. The story shows that it is okay to need a quiet moment. It also gives the student simple phrases to use with other people. And now this in a visual version of the same social story. It presents the same message in a shorter and more structured way. This format can be especially helpful for a student with autism spectrum disorder because it combines simple language with visual support. The story shows a clear sequence, then you can see. In this way, the student is supported not only in understanding the situation, but also in learning socially appropriated and functional way to communicate a personal need. So, to conclude, I would like to highlight several key points. I don't have so much time, so you can read itself, but I hope they will continue to create learning and career opportunities there every student can participate, make choices, and feel that they belong. So
.eu and Euroguidance LinkedIn and Facebook pages, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.